I'm just waiting for some people to jump on here. Looks like we don't really have much on here to begin with. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video if you're on a smaller screen. If you're on a larger screen, it should be to the right of the video. So it looks like we just have one question right here so far from Ollie. So, or Allie, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. But yeah, if you got your questions, go ahead and post them in there. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty boring if we don't get any questions. So we'll start here with Ollie. So Ollie says, as shown in General Vault video 141 and G140 from Clay and yourself, can you demonstrate where in swing and how to move the right forearm facing towards the sky and how in lower than left arm? I guess I'm not sure about the context of the video. Contrary to popular belief, I don't have every single video on the website memorized. You know, there's hundreds and hundreds of videos. So let me see. Since we don't really have any questions, I can go kind of see if I can jog my memory on what that is. What exactly you're referring to. Let's see here, G140 and 141. And it's hard to believe we've done that many. So all good players do this in the golf swing. Okay, yeah. So that's about basically getting the club to work from the inside. Basically, you know, because you know, the basis of G140 is, you know, the all good players do this is basically, you know, if we have the club out here, it's going to be very, very difficult to be consistent because you're just going to hit poles and slices typically. Now, if it's in line with your hands, that would be more like a fade. You know, we do see players who don't necessarily have it pointing out to the right as much, but most players either have it slightly to the right, quite a bit to the right, or maybe even in line with the target. But those players that do that, they still pull the handle to the left, but they get the path to go to the left a little bit. So players that do that would be like Brooks Koepka, you know, Dustin Johnson, you know, that sort of thing. But generally, you're going to see pretty much all good players are going to be kind of in this position right here. Now, Clay's video, I'm like I said, I haven't watched the video. I don't know exactly what he's talking about there. But you're saying how to move the right arm facing towards the sky and lower than the left arm. So that's got to start. Really, what you got to look at is what the root cause is, because if you can put yourself in a bad position from the get go. Really, you can put yourself in a bad position at address. So we can go into detail on this just because we don't really have any questions. But generally, you know, if you're at address and you've really under, right, and you're kind of like this in the start, and you're kind of really protracting your shoulder out, and everything's open. It's going to be really, you're going to have to do a lot of compensations in the swing to get that in a good position. So I would say from an address standpoint, I would try to have your trail arm is going to be more under from the address position. And then your elbow pit's going to be more up, right? So more pointing out away from you. Whereas if you have your elbow pit pointing more toward the target, right? You can even think of it as your elbow where it's pointing, right? I see a lot of people, they'll have their elbow kind of pointing out away from the target, right? Well, if you do that, it just makes it more difficult to get the club in a good position. So have that elbow kind of pointed more toward your hip here, and that's going to put you in a better position to start with. So that'd be number one. Now, from there, you know, it comes down to what we do in the backswing, right? So in the backswing, if I really bend my arm a bunch and suck this club to the inside, it's going to be really, really difficult in the downswing to get right. So we need to be bringing this club more out, keeping that trail arm straighter, especially in the beginning of the swing, right? So that way we can kind of throw the club back, and then as we get up to the top, it can start to fold, but we're still going to have some width here, right? So we're still going to have our hands kind of out away from our body here, and that's going to allow us to have the space to be able to let the arm kind of work into the body there, right? If I'm in at the top here and I'm really folding up my arms at the top, which I see a lot of people do to try to lengthen the swing, People will really try to fold their arms like this to really lengthen the swing due to a poor rotation in the backswing. And then from there, they will tend to throw the right arm out. So basically what we want to do is we want to put that trail arm in a position at address and have it work the correct way in the backswing. That's going to allow you to work it in like this. So the way I can equate it would be like if you were going to throw a ball, right? So if I had a ball here and I was going to throw it, right? I wouldn't go back and I wouldn't be like this, right? But that's a lot of positions that people are in at the top of the swing. They're kind of like this, right? I wouldn't, if I was going to throw this ball with a lot of power, I wouldn't go like this, right? But that's what a lot of people do in their golf swings. I would bring it out, I'd get it out away from me, right? And then I would lead with my elbow, right? And get my elbow kind of out of the way as I'm opening up, and then I would let it go. That's exactly what we want to be doing in the golf swing. And that's how you get to this position as we're coming down. We need to give ourselves space. We need to set up in a way that's going to allow us to take the club away in a way that's going to allow us to get the club in a good, or get the arm in a good position at the top. That's going to allow you to work it in the way that we want to in the downswing. So it's hard for me to know exactly what you need to do specifically, but what it comes down to is, what is it, what are you doing in your swing, and kind of look at those things. All right. So I would look at, okay, in my backswing or in my setup, am I doing something that's going to make it difficult for me? In my backswing, am I doing something that's making it difficult for me to do that? Right. And in my transition, you can be in a great position here at the top to be able to move the arm in the right way, but maybe in the transition, for some reason, you want to go like that. And that could be because the face is really open, right? If you're really opening up the face when you go up to the top, you may try to swing left to get the face closed. So you have to look at what's going on. And unfortunately, there's no way for me to know what you need to do. But if you start out with that drill, right, to kind of get the feel of where you need to be with that drill that I talked about, then you can kind of reverse engineer it from there, right? You can look at, okay, well, why am I not able to get into this position? Well, let's go back to the top of the swing. Well, what's going on at the top of the swing? Well, my elbow's going like that. Well, why is my elbow doing that? Then go to the transition, see what's going on there. So you kind of have to backtrack it. And that can be a difficult thing to kind of work through on your own. So if you find that it is very difficult and you just can't figure it out, I'd recommend working with an instructor and doing something like our online swing review program, where you can send videos of your swing, and then we can look at, okay, this is what you need to do to get better, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure if I still have any spots available. I can check. Actually, I have one spot available right now. So if you're interested in working with me, I do have a spot available. And you can claim that spot by clicking the Get a Review link at the top of the page. And that'll take you to the swing review page. All right, so let's keep going. Glad to see we got some questions in here. So Steve L says, when lagging the club and keeping arms straight, I have a hard time hitting the ball clean on the face. I historically use the chicken arms to make sure I get the ball on the face. How do I consistently hit the ball on the face using this technique? It seems very hard to me. So first of all, the arms aren't going to be straight when you're creating lag. The lead arm is typically going to be pretty straight, but the trail arm is actually going to be folding, right? So when I go up to the top of the swing, my trail arm is typically going to have around a 90-degree bend in it, right? So I'm going to have around a 90-degree bend in it. And then as I come down, a lot of times that bend will increase as I create lag. And then when I come into impact, it's straightening out, but it's typically not going to be straight. It's typically going to have some bend in it. And then I straighten it. All my, everything gets straightened out when we go into the release position. So just wanted to clear that part up. But then it goes into having trouble hitting the ball on the face. So when you're creating lag in the swing, a lot of times what's happening is you're opening the face, right? So there's things that are controlling the club face that you may not be aware of. So one is the release of the club. So if I get lag, I'm typically going to release the club later, right? And when I release the club later, that's going to open up the face. So what I need to do is I need to do something else to close the face. So that may be having, turning these wrists down as you're coming in to get that club face more closed. So that'd be bowing the lead wrist or bending back the trail wrist. Now, the other thing that you want to make sure of when you're creating lag is that you're not cupping that lead wrist a bunch. That's what a lot of people do, is they try to cup this lead wrist. Now, when you do that, you can create more lag, but the problem with that is that opens up the face, right? We just talked about how bowing the wrist closes the face. So if you cup that lead wrist, that's going to open up the face, and that's going to make it even more difficult to get the club face more square. So when you're creating lag, we want to keep this wrist nice and flat, or even bowing as we're coming down, right? That's going to allow you to create the lag. So let's understand where lag comes from. Part of where lag comes from is this thumbs up, right? Is this what we call radial deviation, the thumbs up position? But you can't go thumbs up that much in reality, right? If I cut my wrist, I can go thumbs up more, but that's not what we want to do, because that's going to open up the face. So if I can go thumbs up in a more neutral position, or even a bowed position, that's where I want to be with it. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is the club being on an incline, right? So if I have the shaft straight up and down like this, that's how much lag I can generate, right? But if I shallow out the club, I put the club on an incline, well, now look, that's the same amount of wrist cock, radial deviation, but it appears like I have a lot more lag here because I shallowed the club. The club is on an incline, right? And then lastly, you're going to have momentum, right? So when you're swinging this club up, the club's going to have momentum that's going to create more lag there. So that's really where the appearance of lag comes from. It comes from just that. So I would look at your swing and see, okay, am I creating lag in the wrong way? Am I cupping my wrist, right? That's probably, if I had to guess, that's probably what's happening. And that's making it really difficult to get the club on the ball. So I'd look at your swing on video, see what's going on there, see if you're keeping those wrists in a nice, good position. And then I'd work on trying to keep that wrist flat or even bowed as you're coming down. So that way that face is nice and stable. It's in a good position. So that way you can turn through, you can use that lag that you created and rotate and snap through impact. All right, so JB says, good morning, Q. My left shoulder wants to turn up and out prematurely, resulting in top shots. I have been working TSG system, and this problem just started popping up and ruining otherwise really good rounds. I try to initiate by transition by moving my left shoulder toward the left knee, then turn. I'm just not consistent enough when there is a scoring opportunity. Where would you direct me in the TSG system? It's hard to say without seeing your swing, but if you're kind of moving forward a lot too much, you may be getting your body too far out in front, and that's going to make it difficult for you to rotate, right? So if I'm here in my swing, I may be exaggerating what you're doing, but if I'm getting over here in the swing, I'm going to have a hard time rotating my body. I'm going to have to kind of pop up and throw the club, right? So I would venture to guess that's what's going on. Like I said, it's hard for me to know without seeing your swing, but that would be my guess. So when you're shifting to your lead side, we want to have some lateral movement to our lead side, but we don't want to get too far out in front, because otherwise we can't rotate, right? And we're not going to be able to, whip the club around. We're going to have to stand up and throw the club. So what I would imagine here is that your hip joint doesn't get outside of your ankle, right? So I don't want my hip joint going past my ankle. So if I have a line going straight up from my ankle, my hip joint will be ahead of it here. If I'm here, I can't rotate. So what I want to be is I want to be right here, and now I can rotate my hip out of the way. I can push into the ground and rotate my chest and my shoulders up out of the way. So that's what I'd be looking at, is not sliding the body forward too much, getting to that lead side, landing into that lead side. And then once you have that, keep that hip inside that ankle, and then you can turn the hip around and not stand up and top the ball. That's what I'd be looking at. But again, it's hard to say without seeing your swing. So PT says, I think that I saw that Clay's lowest iron is a 4 iron. What is your lowest iron that you carry? Is it his low? is his lowest a 4 iron, that due to getting the forward shaft lean, that means a 4 is more like a 3 iron? Thanks. Um, my lowest iron is a 4 iron as well. Um, so part of it is, shaft lean. Um, part of it is that, with a 3 iron goes can go pretty low. So a hybrid, you can get the same distance, but you can get more highness or more height out of the shot because of the way that the club is constructed, and they can be a little bit easier to hit out of. So basically, his and my bag are constructed very similarly. We're both driver 3 wood, hybrid, and then 4 through pitching wedge, and then he carries a little higher lofted wedges. I think he goes 60, 56, 52, and I go 58, 54, 50 on my wedges. But that's about the only difference as far as the way that the bag is constructed. So, like I said, a 3 iron, will go a certain distance, but then a 4 iron or a hybrid of a similar loft will go a similar distance, but it will go higher because of the way that the hybrid is constructed, and it's easier to hit a hybrid out of maybe a little bit of a rough lie. It's very difficult to hit a low lofted iron out of a tough lie. So the hybrid is just a little bit easier to hit because of the way that it's constructed and the way that it has some center gravity more underneath the ball, which helps it launch up higher. So, and that has a lot to do with shaft lean, right? And it has a lot to do with just the fact of the matter that it's just easier to hit. So I used to carry a 3 iron in the bag. It does have its advantages. I think off the tee, if I could have an extra club in my bag, I would probably have a 3 iron because off of the tee where you have a perfect lie, I like to hit kind of like a stinger kind of 3 iron off the tee sometimes is a little bit of a fairway finder. Now I do that with my 4 iron right now, but a 3 iron would go a little bit further. So it has its pros and its cons, but obviously you can only have 14 clubs in the bag, so you kind of have to pick and choose your battles. And generally on the court, I would much rather have a club, a hybrid club that I could, and you could hit stingers with the hybrid club, but they're just not going to be as, they're not going to be as, they're going to be higher and with a little bit more spin as opposed to lower with less spin. That's going to go a little bit further, which would be a better shot off the tee. So that's why you see a lot of times, when tour players, when they go over and they play in the Open Championship, a lot of them put like 2 irons and 3 irons in the bag when they would normally maybe play a hybrid because there's not as much rough there, right? There's not as much rough, and it's more of a course where you want to keep it low and let it run, right? The link style of play. So it really just depends on what you need. I would say most players are actually going to benefit from having more hybrids in the bag, because if you're lower club head speed, even if you have great shaft lean or not great shaft lean, if you're lower club head speed, you're going to have trouble getting the ball up in the air, right? So just because you're just not giving the ball enough energy to get up in the air. So usually, it's better to have a few hybrids in the bag. Replace the 4 iron and the 5 iron with hybrids, and a lot of times you'll play better because you'll be able to get those clubs up in the air. I find a lot of players that have 4 and 5 irons and 3 irons in the bag that don't have a lot of club head speed. They all go to the same distance because they can't get the ball up in the air, right? So it doesn't make any sense to have 3 clubs in the bag that go the same distance. You may as well just have one and then have some other situation, right? So if you can get some hybrids in there, a lot of times that can help you to get up there. Now, what I will say, to know what you need to have in your bag, there's some things where we do want to kind of try to copy what tour players do, or what better players do. Then there's some situations where they do it that way because of certain attributes that they have. If you did that, it would actually be to your detriment. So just because Clay carries a 4 iron doesn't mean that's going to be the best thing for every player, right? So the best way to really know that is to get professionally fitted. That's what I would always recommend. It's always nice to know what you have in your bag fits you exactly. Now you can kind of do trial and error and or just not really care that much about it. But if you want to know what you're supposed to have in your bag, I recommend getting professionally fitted by a reputable fitter. Some options that I would say is they're called Club Champion. It's a chain. They're going to get you on track, man. They're going to have you hit your old clubs, and they're going to show you how new clubs could be better. So I don't have any affiliation with Club Champion. I've just gone there myself and had fine experiences. So like I said, they're located all over the United States. We have one here in Orlando area. So if you want to check it out, just go on Google, search Club Champion, and you can find. But there's all kinds of club fitters all over the country, obviously, that are good as well. So Efrain Alvarado, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Says question on the YouTube video for weight transfer with the teeter-totter board. Are the foot pegs placed at a normal stance, or should I go wider on the board? It really just depends on your personal preference, right? If you have a wider stance, put them wider. If you don't, if you have a narrower stance, then put them narrower. I think Clay put those at whatever his kind of normal stance is. Which in general, normal stance, width. I typically like to see, for an iron, I like to see the middle of the ankles to be right outside shoulder width apart. And obviously, these are generalizations, but that's generally a good place to be. So I would look something like that, middle of the ankles up through the outside of my shoulders. And then for driver, I like to see the inside of the ankles on the outside of the shoulders, a little bit wider. That makes it easier to stay behind the ball a little bit more and hit up on the ball and to create power. So Bert A says Lexi Thompson does not finish high like most players, yet very effective. Can you demonstrate what she is doing? I think she's just trying to keep the ball flight low. Typically, with a driver, she definitely finishes high because she's really trying to release everything. But for an iron, and I haven't looked at Lexi Thompson's swing that much, but kind of like Tommy Fleetwood, for example. So Tommy Fleetwood, kind of has what we would call like an umbrella finish, right? And that's because he's really, really trying to de-loft it as he's coming through, right? And he's trying to finish. That's kind of like, basically, he's talked about how he hit like a ton of punch shots, right? And that's how he kind of got to where he became a really good ball striker. So that's essentially what you kind of do in a punch shot is you try to feel those arms really, really long and out away from you instead of really high and that's going to promote a higher ball flight, right? So for a driver, you're going to see Tommy Fleetwood and Lexi Thompson both come around into that full finish. But for irons where they're trying to maybe de-loft it more and play it a little bit lower, you may see more of a low kind of finish, kind of like umbrella type kind of finish, just like that. So that's from trying to drive the hands forward and long through the impact zone, right? That's basically what they're trying to do there. So Gene M says 90% or I think you might mean of the time I hit my fairway wood thin and low. Any suggestions you give on this? So what I would look at is maybe in your setup. A lot of times when I see with players when they hit the fairway woods thin and low on the face, like what you're talking about, they play the ball too far forward in their stance. They're playing it more like a driver. So if you have the ball too far forward, so basically what we need to do is we need to get the low, since you're hitting a fairway wood off of the ground, right? You're hitting it off of the ground. You need the low point of your swing to be in front of the golf ball on the target side of the ball. So if you imagine, the low point is if I have this hula hoop here, the low point is where this club comes down, reaches its lowest point, and then works back up. So if you're hitting it really low on the face, odds are that low point of your swing is happening at or even before the golf ball. What you need is to get that low point in front of the golf ball, right? You need to make ball first contact and have the club bottom out in this area. So if you play the ball too far forward, it makes it a lot more difficult to get that low point to be more in front. So I play the ball, what I would say generally is if I have my good spine tilt here, straight, if I hang this club from my earlobe, right, and just hang and drop it straight down, that's generally a pretty good ball position for about any shot you're going to play off the turf. Now you can play it slightly more forward for a fairway wood, and when I say slightly, I'm talking like a ball. So that's like 1.5 inches, right? So, we don't want to play the ball. When I see people struggle with fairway woods, a lot of times they're playing the ball way off their front foot, and that's just too far forward. It's going to be, you're going to tend to have that club bottom out too soon. So that's why I look at first. And then the other thing that I see is that it kind of becomes a snowball effect, right? So you're hitting the ball really, really low. So what you'll tend to do is you'll try to help the ball up in the air. Well, let's say you have that great ball position, and then you're still hitting it low on the face. Well, if you try to help the ball up in the air, that's again going to make the club bottom out too soon. So I'd really imagine almost like you're hitting your 3-wood like a wedge, right? Like you're trying to hit down and through the ball and trying to take a divot. That's what I'd be trying to imagine that you're doing. And more than likely, you'll get that low point more in front. That strike will be higher on the face, and you'll make much better contact, and the ball will go further. So I would just go from, get your ball position, get yourself in a position to where you feel like you can take a divot and try to take a divot in front of the ball. Now, when you take a divot in front of the ball, you want to make sure that you're not going like this to do that, right? Because if you swing low and left, the ball is just going to be a pull low to the left, right? You might get the strike higher on the face, but it's just going to be a pull lower to the left. So we want to make sure that we're getting that divot, but we're still swinging from the inside, right? And it's not going to be as big of a divot as you would with a wedge. Part of the reason is because of the geometry of the club, right? So with a 3-wood, it's got a softer leading edge. It's usually kind of got a scoopy leading edge. It's rounded, right? Whereas with a wedge, I have a wedge right here. This is a very sharp leading edge. It's going to dig into the turf, right? And also the ball is going to push the club down in the turf because it has loft, right? If it has less loft, it's not going to push the club down as much and create much of a divot. So that's a lot of reason why wedges are going to take deeper and bigger divots than a hybrid club. But I would really try to feel like you're taking a divot, though, even though the reality is that you'll probably just kind of rough up the turf a little bit depending on the lie. But that's what I'd be looking at. You got to get those. I would get the setup looking right, and then I'd have the sensation that you're hitting down. You're swinging from the inside, but hitting down on the ball to get that strike higher on the face. All right, so let's keep going. So Jim N says, on downswing and club parallel to the ground, last parallel. I'm having a heck of a hard time getting that to the point to occur when my hands are in front of my trail leg instead of when my hands are about 6 inches from my leg. Any drills to help maybe by exaggerating. So what I'd look at is what the root cause to that is. There's something that's happening before that point that's not allowing you to do that. So that could be, you could be coming down steep. A lot of times it has to do with the pitch of the shaft and the club face, where the club face is, right? So what I mean by that is if I'm coming down and this club is steep, right, at this point in the swing, right? So if I'm at the top of the swing and this club is steep, well, in order to hit a functional shot, what a lot of players will do is they'll stand up and they'll flip. Well, if I stand up and I flip, well, by the time I get here, my club's already parallel to the ground, right? Because I've stood up, right? So it may be that the club is steep and you're having to stand up and release the club a little bit earlier as a means to get the club to shallow out. Because if I stand up, look, that shallows out the club. That gets the club back to the inside of my hands. It could also be the face is open, right? So if I have my wrist really cupped at the top and my face is open, right, where I'm coming down and my face is open, right? Well, I have to kind of flip that club and release that club to get it to square up. And that could be what's going on. You could be flipping that club to get it to square up because the face is open. So I would look and see if your face is open. It could be that you're at the top of the swing and you're just casting the club right away to maybe try to create some power, be able to help the ball up in the air. So there's all kinds of reasons why why that could be happening, but you just have to look at your swing and see what's going on. So some places where that might help would be maybe the move course. The move course is all about getting that club to shallow out and getting that face to square earlier, right? So if we get that club in position, that face in position, it's much easier to pivot through the ball and have that club to be on plane and not have to make compensations. The lag course could be what you need to work on. If you're casting this club from the very start of things, you may need to be doing that. Part of shallowing the club is also getting some hand depth, right? So if I'm not turning my shoulders, right? If I'm not turning my shoulders, I'm just going like this, and I start my downswing. Well, I'm going to have a hard time, getting that club to work from the inside because, my arms are already, out in front of me, right? So I'm going to have to flip the club, right? So if I can get the club more behind me, get some more depth here, well, now I can more easily shallow that club and get it behind me and pivot through. So the power turn may be what you need to do. So it really just comes down to work. That's what the top speed golf system is, essentially. The top speed golf system is about getting you to be in that position. So you kind of have to look at your swing, look at, okay, are my spine angles good? Is my power turn good? Am I getting lag? Is my compression? If I'm bumping my hips out, I'm going to stall my pivot and I'm going to flip the club, right? So you have to look at, kind of what's going on there. So I would look at the pieces of the top speed golf system plus the move, and those would be, and look at those and understand what those are by watching the videos, and then look at your swing on video, which I could tell you already have, right? And see, okay, where's the root cause of why this is happening, and then start to work on that. If you want some help from an instructor to do that, I highly recommend signing up for Element Swing Reviews. Not sure if maybe somebody grabbed the spot, but if you're interested, I did have a spot available a little bit ago. Not sure if I still do. So I still have a spot available. So if you're interested, click the link and get started. All right, so let's get back here. So Carrie B says, wouldn't having too much radial in the downswing cause a flip as opposed to having more flexion in the right wrist? Hold on. Wouldn't having too much radial in the downswing cause a flip? Well, a radial would be the opposite of a flip. If you're getting radial, right, that's lag. That's the opposite of a flip. So I don't understand the question. So ulnar would be releasing the club. So if you have too much ulnar early in the swing, you're generally going to flip, right? Radial is where the club's lagging. That's kind of cocking the wrist, right? So, that would be, if you do that too early, it can cause you to want to flip, right? So if I go radial too early in my backswing, I'm basically full radial here, because the moment you go to your full range of motion with the radial, right, you overdo it, then that's the moment you're going to want to release it. So what we don't want to do is create that radial too much in the backswing, max it out, because in the downswing, you're going to typically, not always, there are some players that maintain that pretty well, but what I see from a lot of players is that they'll release it right away. So generally, we want to have about 80% of our radial at the top, and then when we start the downswing, we max it out, and then we release it, right? And typically going to be maxed out by that lead arm parallel position in the swing. That's typically when it's going to happen. So not sure if I answered your question, but you definitely want to max out the radial at some point in the swing. And generally, that's going to be maxed out by lead arm parallel, or even a little bit later. So Bert A says, what brand hybrids do you hit with? I have a Ping hybrid. I think it's a G4 something, something like that. But I've had a few hybrids. I've had a Titleist hybrid that I liked for a long time. I've had I had a Cobra hybrid that I used for a long time and I really liked. Not sure if I had any other ones. I had TaylorMade Rescue, a hybrid, a long time ago. back when they first came out, kind of with the hybrids and rescue clubs. I think that was my first one. So yeah, I mean, I've liked all of them. I mean, it's not necessarily about the brand that you hit that's necessarily better than all the other ones. I think pretty if you buy anything from a reputable brand for the most part, they're going to be pretty good. If you buy it from those big brands like Ping, Titleist, TaylorMade, Callaway, those are basically they're going to have good hybrid clubs. And from there, it's really just about personal preference, what you prefer, and you got to hit different ones. The hybrid that's best for me may not be the best for you. The Ping hybrid may not be the best one for you. I would venture to say it'd be a pretty good one for most people, but it may not be the best fit for you. So that's why you just have to get professionally fitted to know exactly what you need. Questions coming. We got 20 minutes or so left. I'm just checking some emails in the meantime. All right, so we got a question here from Gene. So Gene M says, when hitting a fade, can you give some recommendation on how much more club to take to cover the distance? Really depends on how you hit a fade. A lot of times when people hit a fade, all things equal, a fade's going to go a little bit shorter. So, the reason for that is that the face, when you hit a fade, the face is open to the path. And if you don't get more shaft lean to compensate for that face opening up, you're going to add some loft, right? Because the face opening adds loft, right? Whereas conversely, when you hit a draw, it closes the face. You're closing the face of the path, which actually de-lofts the club a little bit. That's why I generally recommend most people hit draws, just because it's just a more powerful shot to hit. But obviously, there are situations when you'd want to hit a fade, right? Where it makes more sense to hit a fade. Maybe you have an approach shot and the pin's on the right, you're right-handed, right? And you want to hit a fade in there because it's just the best shot to hit in that situation, even though it doesn't necessarily go as far as normal. So it's really something you have to play around with, because it's not everyone needs to take one club extra. Some people might need to take two clubs extra. So I would just play around with it. Try taking one extra club. Some people it might be it's a half a club difference, right? Some people it might be two club difference. So I would start out and see what taking an extra club does, and then go from there. That's kind of what I would start out with. But there's no set. Some people, because of the way that they hit fades, don't have to take an extra club because they're de-lofting the club extra in order to do that, right? And that's kind of an advanced way to hit a fade, and we have some videos on that on the website. If you search power fade, you can find those videos, but I would say that that's kind of an advanced way to hit a fade. So if you're having trouble hitting a fade right now, get to where you can hit a fade kind of the conventional way right now, and to get to where you can do that pretty well. And then once you can do that really well and you understand how to control that face and path relationship, then you could look at doing a power fade. But basically, to hit a power fade, what you're doing is you're basically kind of really trying to pivot more and have the hands go kind of hard left through impact. Now, when you do that, when you have the hands work hard and to the left through impact, that gets your path kind of working to the left, right? So the path kind of works more to the left, but that also kind of opens the face. If you're getting the handle more forward, that opens the face. Well, the handle more forward also de-lofts the face, so it can kind of cancel things out a little bit, and you kind of hit that kind of power fade. That's how you see players like Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson, and those players that hit those really powerful fade shots. That's how they're doing it. But I've learned how to hit that right one at first. But I'd first start out with about one club, see what that does for you, and then make an adjustment from there if needed. Steve L says, what are your swing thoughts with driver and iron, same or different, or nothing? So generally I like to have no swing thoughts for the most part, but obviously that's not always going to be the case. Usually they're going to be the same unless I'm having trouble with one versus the other, right? So basically the main differences between your driver and your irons are the way that you're hitting the golf ball, right? So with an iron, right, we're hitting down on the ball, right? So and when I hit down on the ball, it's easier to get my path to be going more to the right, right? So when I hit down on it, because my club is working down on an inclined plane, right, it's easier to get my path to be more to the right when I'm hitting the golf ball. Whereas with a driver, it's more difficult to do that. So we'll talk about how you would maybe compensate for that here in a minute. So I'm hitting down and through the ball, and then and I'm trying to make ball first contact because the ground's in the way, right? And I'm trying to get height and spin and all those good things. So ball position is generally going to be a little bit forward to the middle of my stance I talked about earlier. Straight down from the earlobe is generally a good position if we have that good spine tilt, if we have that good setup. So that's going to allow me to hit down and through the ball. And I'm generally going to have a narrower stance, which is going to make it easier for me to get to my lead side and be able to get that ground contact to happen more in front. So basically, it's kind of the geometry of the shot that's really different, right? Iron shot or any shot that's off the turf, ball first, and then turf in front, and then I'm getting to my lead side more, right? So with the setup, I'm going to be a little bit narrower, and the ball position is going to be more toward the middle. Now for a driver, right, I'm trying to hit up on the ball. So if you imagine the geometry of the shot, what I have is this ball that's got a nail through it. With an iron, I'm imagining like I'm driving a nail down into the ball, and then I'm hitting the turf in front. With a driver, I'm imagining that I'm having that club bottom out, and then I'm driving the nail up into the ball. So the way that I do that is I play the ball more. I get a little bit wider stance to make it easier to be more behind the ball and have the club bottom out before the ball. And I'm also going to have my ball position more forward to allow that to happen, right? And what I may also do, because I talked about earlier how hitting an iron, it's easier to swing that club from the inside because of where the ball is, right? Well, with a driver, because the ball position is more forward, your club is going to tend to want to work more to the left. So what I tend to do is I actually set up a little bit more closed with my driver, right? A little bit more closed with my stance. I drop my trail foot back a little bit to make it easier to swing that club from the inside to the ball. So though, I'm not really thinking, if you're asking me personally what I think about, I don't really think about those things because I've been doing those things for so long that it's ingrained. I don't even think about it. I always just set up to an iron, like that. I might change my setup a little bit based on the shot that I'm trying to hit. But if you're just talking about a stock shot, apples to apples comparison, right? I'm not thinking about anything different. I'm not thinking about dropping my trail leg back. Now, if you're someone who doesn't do that and you struggle with coming over the top and the path is too much out to in, right? Well, then that may be something you need to think about. That may need to be a swing thought. So the good part is generally the swing thoughts that you have are actually before the swing, right? They're in the setup. Most of the changes that you're making with a driver and iron, the differences, they're all in the setup. And it's all because of the geometry of the way that you're hitting the shot. Mostly the mechanics are mostly the same beyond that. So that's really what it comes down to. So if you have anything specific in regards to that stuff, I'll be happy to answer it. But that's basically what's going on there. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so Steve W says, is the pivot in the downswing one continuous rate of turn, or better described as segmented between beginning of downswing and then once again near or just after impact? No, it's not continuous, because if it was continuous, then the club would never release, right? So it's accelerating and then decelerating is what's happening, right? So in the beginning, it's slow, and then it accelerates, and then it decelerates, and then the club releases. So if you imagine this, if the pivot was the exact same rate, right? It was a continuous rate, that would be like attaching a ribbon to a fan blade and then turning the fan blade on and having it on a continuous setting, right? If you do that, then if you imagine my arm is the fan blade and the club is the ribbon, it would just follow in line. It would never ever release if it was a continuous rate, right? So, in order for the club to release, it's gonna slow down, and it's gonna slow down because we're gonna reach our end range of motion, right? We're gonna get all coiled up here and get all turned, and then we're reaching our end range of motions. My hips can't keep rotating, my torso can't keep rotating, right? My arm can't keep going around and round in a circle, right? So everything's reaching its end range of motion, so things are going to decelerate, and we want that too, because that's what's going to give you speed. We don't necessarily want to have a continuous rate of speed through the ball, because what's going to happen is this club won't release, and you call that kind of like handle dragging through. Now, most people are going to need to feel like they're handle dragging, when the reality is that they're not. Because most people release the club early, but that's the reality of what's going on there. So not sure if that's exactly what your question was, but it's not a continuous rate. We're definitely releasing that club. Things are beginning to stall. Now, when people release early, it's because that's stalling too early, right? We're getting here, and then my hips stall out, my chest stalls out, and I have to get the club to the ball somehow. So I end up kind of standing up and early releasing, right? And that stall of the hips or the chest or whatever it might be is going to be from something that's going on maybe in your backswing or in your transition, the pitch of the shaft, the face orientation, things like that. Those can play a role into it. It also could be physical limitation, right? If you're not physically capable of rotating through the ball. Typically, if you're not physically capable of rotating through the ball, you're not physically capable of rotating in the backswing either. So you're going to be just kind of all arms. But yeah, so that's generally what's going on there. All right, so Greg C says, I have pretty short backswing, and I know you ingrain creating time and space to increase club head speed. And I noticed when I consciously try to get the hands higher in the backswing, I notice club head speed increases. Is there a drill you recommend to instill a more natural feel of getting in a higher, more powerful position at the top? Yeah, that's the power turn course. That's the entire power turn course. So work through the power turn course, and that's what's going to get you to get your body coiling up in the backswing, and also turning through in the downswing, but more so creating that space and time to accelerate the club. That's why it's part of the top speed golf system. So important, not only for speed, but to have the club come down in the right place. Because as I talked about earlier, if I don't turn my shoulders and my hips, my hand, I don't have any hand depth, and I'm going to end up kind of coming over the top, right? So we need to get our body nice and coiled up in a good, powerful position in order to do that. And that's through the power turn course. So to get to the power turn course, click the instruction tab, then click the Top Speed Golf System and work through those drills. and that's what's going to get you to where it's ingrained, right? You're working through those drills to instill it into your motion to make it second nature. So Britt A says, when shallowing the club and rotating the hands close, I find myself pulling the ball. Any thoughts on this? My thought is that you're not really shallowing the club, or you're shallowing the club early and then coming over the top. So that would be my guess, right? Because if you're really shallowing the club in the correct way, if you were overdoing the shallowing, then you would be swinging too much from the inside. So really, you just need to match up the amount of shallowing that you're doing with the amount of rotation that you have. So let me kind of demonstrate. What I find that a lot of people do when they're trying to shallow out the club is they'll go like this, right? So their back swings will kind of look like this. So that's shallowing in the backswing. And then in the downswing, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction where we go like this. Well, if I go like this, that club actually steepens, right? And now if I rotate, you're gonna swing over the top, and there's your pull, right? So that could be what's going on. So what I'd work on is feeling more steep in the backswing and actually shallowing the club in the downswing, right? So feeling like the club goes more up in the backswing, right? So a good checkpoint would be kind of have your arms in front of your chest here in the backswing, and to have the butt end of the club pointing on this side of the golf ball. So if I have my ball here and I'm set up, I want to have my hands about in front of my chest here, and I want to have that club inside the ball. Now, as I continue up to the top, that's going to make it a lot easier to shallow out the club. And now when I start the downswing, again, I'm going to have my hands in front of my chest, but I'm going to have this butt end of the club pointing outside of the golf ball. That's shallow, right? So that's where shallowing would be. It'd be pretty hard to pull the ball from this position. I mean, you could pull the ball. I mean, if you completely stall your body and then throw your club that way, you could. But that's a pretty unnatural response. Or if you have that club pointed outside the golf ball and you just rotate like Sergio Garcia, then sure, you could pull the ball. But I would venture to say that that's not what's happening. The most common thing that I see is people shallow the club in the backswing, and then they steepen it in the downswing, and there's your pull. So I look at your swing on video and see if your feel is real, right? And I try to feel like you're steeper and then shallower in the downswing and able to pivot through from there. All right, so let's keep the questions coming. We got, 5 minutes left? Might have time for a couple more. All right, like I said, we got a few minutes left. If we have maybe one or two more questions. Steve L says, thank you. Appreciate all the info. No problem, Steve. Glad to help. So Jason Y says, "What type of golf ball do you play?" I play the. I don't have a ball that I just only play, but the Snell MTV Black is pretty good. I mean, it's a softer ball, soft cover ball. I think for the money, it's pretty dang good. They're pretty dang good balls. You know, I mean, I love Pro V1s. I think they're a great golf ball. TaylorMade TP5 and TP5X are really good golf balls. Bridgestone has a lot of really good balls. Um, there's a lot of really good golf balls out there. Strixon has a good golf ball. Um, there's a lot of good golf balls out there for the most part. So, um, I prefer kind of a softer cover ball because especially those like the Pro V1s and the Snells and those kinds of balls because they go pretty far, right? And they have soft covers on them, so they'll spin, and they have a soft feel on the greens, and they'll spin around the green. So to me, that's what I like, but not everyone likes that, and that's not always the best thing from everybody. Not everyone's gonna want to have all that spin on the ball because they already struggle with putting too much spin on the ball. So you may want a ball that's lower spinning, maybe a harder cover ball. So those are just some things to consider for sure. All right, we're right at 12 o'clock, and thank you everyone for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.